want to answer a lot of questions. What kind of questions, sir? For example, the interviewer might also ask you, is it possible to store multiple values, multiple data with the same values or with the same data inside a list? So what are you trying to ask here? What I'm trying to ask here is it possible for us to store duplicate data, duplicates inside a list, within a list? Is it possible or not is what I'm trying to explain it here. What do you mean to say, sir? Let us assume this is my list which I'm trying to create here. Maybe I would call this list reference as LST, and how do we create a list? It is by using this pair of square brackets. Maybe the first element that I want to store inside this list, it happens to be a string value. Maybe the value in this case is Arjun. Similarly, there is maybe another a list element that I would like to store it here in the form of a string. Maybe it happens to be Keshav. Similarly, another list element, in this case it happens to be Manohar, like this. So what do I have now here is, this is a list which is containing string values. But then look at this list and tell me one thing. Do you have unique elements or do you have duplicate elements in this? 100% all the data that you see here happens to be unique. But that is not what we're trying to explore in the first program of today's session. Then what are we trying to understand from this here? I would like to know, is it possible for a Python list to also hold duplicate values? Because you will see as the classes would progress, there are a few advanced data types that we would be discussing, which would actually not permit duplicate data. So for you to distinguish between the different data types, this question, and to be precise, this answer becomes very relevant for you guys. Okay, sir, please do demonstrate what happens if the list contains duplicate values. This is what I'm also here for. So maybe let us assume I'm going to write the same data once again. Maybe again it's Arjun. Maybe next again it's Keshav. Next again it's Manohar's data, like this. Sir, why do we only have strings, sir? Of course, you can have any type of data. For our example, I have considered the data elements to be string values. Of course, strings also has not been done for you guys. I do understand it. So this is going to be the flow of the concepts for your batches. Once we complete with all the advanced data types, namely list, tuple, set, and dictionary, that is when we are going to be starting with strings. So till then, please have patience. When it comes to the understanding whether a list would permit us to store duplicate values or not, I would not directly try to execute this code here now. What do you mean to say, sir? First, let us understand. If I try to print my list elements, what do you think is going to be the output? How many copies of Arjun, Keshav, and Manohar are going to be present in the memory? Is it 1 or is it 2? Okay, let us verify this. Now, if I would execute my program, as you can see on the output screen, tell me, first question, does list permit duplicate values to be stored inside it? Absolutely yes, 100% yes. But then, if there is a technically profound person, and 100% he would not stop his question at this point in time. He is going to drill you more when it comes to the internal implementation. What do you mean to say, sir? He would also ask you, okay, you say that lists permit duplicate elements, but how many copies of each of these elements will actually be present in the memory on the RAM of your computer? What do you mean to say, sir? What I mean to say here is, on the output screen, you see that Arjun has appeared twice, Keshav has appeared twice, and similarly, Manohara has also appeared twice. But he is asking, how many copies do you think would be present in the memory? Do you think for Arjun, 2 separate memories would be allocated? Similarly for Keshav, similarly for Manohar? That is what he's trying to ask. Is it going to be single copy, or is it going to be 2 copies, or is it going to be 3 copies? That is what next you should be answering. Okay, sir, please help us answer this question, for which you will have to understand the memory representation of this. So kindly pay attention. Of course, whenever you try to create a list, in the case of Python, even list happens to be an object. Immediately the PVM would go to your heap segment, and on the heap segment, it is going to allocate a piece of memory, a block of memory, only for the sake of creating this list. So let us assume this is my list that is going to be allocated memory on the heap segment. So if this is my list, of course it happens to be a list object, 100%. It should also be holding some address. Maybe let us assume the address of this block of memory happens to be 1000 in this case. Of course it would not be holding an address, but then this block of memory will have a certain address. I have assumed it to be 1000. Okay, sir. Next what, sir? Next what means all of you know how lists are allocated memory. It is also in the form of a sequence. It's a sequence collection. So inside this, you will be storing all those values, whichever you're trying to store it inside the list. Tell me, what is the first element that you're storing inside the list? It happens to be Arjun. But then those of you who are attending my classes regularly, you also understand how a string is actually stored. We know, again, internally it is going to be stored as a collection of characters. That means for every character, if for example there is a string called Arjun, that means Arjun is going to be split as a sequence of characters. A is going to be stored separately, R separately, J separately, U separately, N separately, and in fact the diagram also has been given in your notes. But then if you're expecting more clarity with respect to strings, like I said, you need to be patient, because once we take up strings as a concept, which is going to be a 2 to 3 days long discussion, there you will have complete clarity on it. Perfect, sir. Please understand how the strings stored in this case. I'll just assume, only for the sake of our understanding, let us say this is how it is going to be stored. Maybe first it is Arjun, next the second data that we have is Keshav, next we have Manohar. But then again we see the list is not going to end here. Once again we have Arjun, next we have Keshav, next we have Manohar. So am I clear with so far with respect to how the strings values are stored here? So tell me, if somebody would look at this memory map, what do you think? How many copies of each of these strings do you actually see on the memory map? You might immediately conclude, sir, there are 2 copies of Arjun, Keshav, Manohar. So in fact, internally in the memory also, duplicated data is going to be stored. Please understand, Python is not such a programming language which would afford inefficient utilization of memory. It would never be happening. What do you mean to say, sir? What I mean to say is this. Please understand, I would like to remodify this program. 100%, this is not the correct way of writing this. So let me just erase it. If any of you thought this is how the memory is going to be stored, please understand, what kind of data am I trying to store inside my list? Is it integer, or is it float, or is it a complex number? Is it a Boolean value? What is it? It is a string type of data. Now please understand, it doesn't matter whether it is an integer, float, irrespective of what kind of data, everything and anything in Python happens to be an object. What do you mean to say, sir? What I mean to say here is the contents of the list that you have just created, which is Arjun, Keshav, Manohar, Arjun, Keshav, Manohar, which happens to be string values. Now, please understand, strings are not primitive data types in Python. Even strings happens to be objects. Sir, what do you mean to say, sir? What I mean to say here is this. That means internally, for you to store a Arjun type of data, for you to store a string called as Arjun, strings also happens to be objects in Python. That means if anything is an object, what is the first thing that should happen? Memory allocation has to take place. Sir, are you telling separately on the heap segment, a memory for a dedicated memory for Arjun will be allocated? 100% yes. So like this, let us assume this entire whiteboard screen that you see so far is my heap segment. Now, 100% we know heap segment is present on the RAM. I don't want to draw multiple rectangles here and make the diagram look cluttered. So if this is my heap segment, on the heap segment, another block of memory is going to be allocated like this. Sir, this block of memory will also have an address. No, sir, 100% yes. Maybe let us assume the address in this case happens to be 2000. Again, I repeat, I'm just assuming the address. I've told you from the previous classes, we would never get to know what is the address of an object before you actually allocate, before you create something. After all, of course, once you're done with the creation operation, maybe in the further lines of the code, using the ID function, you can retrieve the address of the object, but you will not be able to predict the address of any object in advance. Okay, sir. What is this object going to contain, sir? We know this object is going to contain nothing other than the string object. Tell me, what is the first string object we have? It is Arjun, and of course, you know how Arjun is going to be stored here. It is going to be stored as a sequence of characters, as a collection of characters. So maybe this is how it is going to be stored. A is going to be stored separately. R is going to be stored separately. J is going to be stored separately, U is going to be stored separately, and N is going to be stored separately like this. Any confusion so far? And of course, every character will have its own dedicated location inside the string object. So maybe these are separate locations, because even strings happens to be one of the ordered data types in Python. Any confusion? Of course, it will have the positive indexes, it will also have the negative indexes, all those extra attachments. Maybe while copying you can do it, but as of now I'm just interested in representing the memory map for Arjun as a string. Okay, sir. Next what, sir? Next what means 100%. This happens to be the very first data which I'm trying to store inside my list object. But sir, where is it present inside the list object, sir? It is present somewhere on the heap segment. List object has a different address. String object has a different address, sir. Today we see it's altogether a new a diagrammatic representation that you are showing to us, sir. Previously also, in many of the list examples, we had string values where in fact you had shown this data directly inside the string list object only, sir. Today, why are you doing this extra circus of giving it a new address, you might ask? Please understand, all these days, considering the limited amount of knowledge that you people had, I was forced to represent it that way. But today I'm making things very clear. Let black be black and white be white. Let us have clear distinguish. What do you mean to say, sir? What I mean to say here is, considering that strings also happens to be objects, it is going to be allocated memory separately. But sir, this string object, I want it to be present inside my list object, sir. Yes, that is absolutely possible. Sir, how is it possible, sir? What is going to happen internally here is, please understand, it is actually going to store the address of this string object in the place of your in the place of the Arjun as an element within your list. What I mean, what do you mean to say, sir? What I mean to say here is this. Now tell me, inside the list, what is the very first element that I'm supposed to store? Arjun. But then I see Arjun is a different object. But sir, I want this list, the very first element, the zeroth index element of the list, to refer to this string called as Arjun, sir. If that is your expectation, it's very simple. What do you mean to say, sir? Tell me, what is the address of Arjun here? 2000. You better store the 2000 here. That means what is going to be stored here happens to be 2000. Any confusion so far? Oh, great, sir. But then, tell me, if at all any memory location is holding the address, how does it behave? Since it is 2000 is not a normal value here, it is an address. Naturally, from this location, it has to start pointing to the object whose address happens to be 2000. That means 100% from here, this object would start pointing to my string object called as Arjun. Any confusions so far? So nothing complicated. Previously, I used to show in all our diagrams that this string will directly be allocated inside the list object. But today, I am making things even more clear for you guys. What is actually what is it that will be actually stored in the inside the list happens to be the address of the corresponding object. That object will be allocated memory separately. Am I clear so far? Okay, sir. Arjun's data we understand, but then we have more string values. 100%. That would also be allocated in the same way. Let us assume for the second string also similarly. This is how the second string is allocated memory. Tell me, what is the second string? The second string's value happens to be Keshav. That means this is how the data is going to be stored. As you can see, the Keshav string object is in the process of construction. So, and you also know how strings are allocated memory in Python. It is going to be allocated as a series of characters, as a collection of characters, where every character will be allocated, will have a dedicated location in the string object. Perfect, sir. Next one. Next what means now we see that Keshav's string object happens to be another brand new string object in the memory. Naturally, a brand new address also has to be assigned to this object. Let us assume the address maybe for Keshav's object in this case happens to be 3000. Okay, sir. But we want this string object called as Keshav to be our first index element in the list. If that is your expectation, you know what you have to do now here is internally what is going to be stored in your list is nothing but 3000 like this. Any confusion? Okay, sir. In that case, what would be the impact of my list? The impact is very simple. This 3000 that you see here is not a primitive value. It is not some random integer value that you're trying to store here. In fact, in the case of integers in Python, even those happens to be objects. In other words, this 3000 happens to be an address, and because of which this particular from this location it will immediately start referring to a string called as Keshav. Any confusion so far? Okay, sir. Next what, sir? Next what means after this we have another string. Can you tell me what is the value of the next string? Yes, it happens to be Manohar. So let us assume this is my next string called Manohar, and this is how it is going to be stored internally. It is any string in Python is going to be stored as a sequence of characters. Next, of course, every single character will have its own dedicated memory location, the way I have represented, and even strings will have its own positive indexing as well as the negative indexing. So let me just give separate individual locations for each of these characters like this. Right. At the same time, I hope all of you have changed your place and you're still no more sleeping on your bed and then parallelly listening to my lecture. It would not suffice for you to completely understand. Maybe now that Manohar happens to be a new string object, let us assume it 100%. It should also have a brand new address in the memory. Maybe for the sake of our understanding, let me give the brand new address for this Manohar object 4000 like this. In other words, the next string location, the next value that has to be stored in my list, which is 100% Arjun's data has been taken care, Keshav's data has been taken care. In my list, I see the next element that I should be storing here happens to be a string called as Manohar. So, sir, will directly Manohar be stored there? 100% not. Somebody who has been following my lecture so far will know what is actually going to be stored here is the object address of Manohar. In this case, it happens to be 4000. As a result of which, immediately from this location, it will start pointing to the string object called as Manohar. And this is the story so far for 3 values in my string. Any confusion so far? Okay, sir, perfect. In the process of understanding whether a list would permit duplicates or not, we also understood how actually objects are stored inside a list. Again, I repeat, please don't be constrained this understanding. Don't restrict yourself this type of understanding only with respect to strings. In fact, this is the same case with respect to any type of elements, any type of values that you will be storing inside a list. This is the same story if you try to store an integer object or a float object or a boolean object, whatever it is. Any confusions? Okay, sir, perfect, sir. But then from this example, we are trying to understand whether it is possible for us to store duplicate values inside a list. Now tell me, after Arjun, Keshav, Manohar, what is the next string value that again you're trying to store? Again, it happens to be Arjun. please understand, your PVM happens to be one of the most smartest softwares in your Python programming language. Every time it would not just blindly go to your RAM on the heap segment. It would not blindly try to create new objects in the heap segment. In fact, before it creates another string object called as Arjun, the first thing it is going to do is it is going to scan your heap segment, and it is going to scan and verify if at all already a string called as Arjun is existing on your heap. Tell me, already do I have a object called as Arjun in my on my heap segment? 100% yes. In that case, your PVM is not going to waste your precious memory on the RAM by reallocating a new object called as Arjun. Sir, but sir, I want my fourth element also in the list to be referring to Arjun, sir. In that case, what PVM is very intelligently going to do here is, after the Manohar's element, the next element should store the value of Arjun. But Arjun is a separate object, so very intelligently, for the same object, for the original string object called as Arjun, its address can be reused again. 100%. Once an object is allocated, you can use its address any number of times. What I mean to say 100%, I'll clarify things more clear. Now, again, after storing the address of Manohar's object, which is 4000, the next address that will be stored in your list happens to be 2000 in this case. Sir, how, sir? The first element also has the address 2000. The fourth element also has the address 2000. Yes. And what is your problem? Tell me, what is the behavior if a memory location is containing the address of any object? It should immediately start pointing to that respective object like this. Sir, is it possible for a single object to have multiple references? 100% yes, absolutely yes. And somebody who is attending all my sessions so far, we should not even have this doubt. We have already figured it out sometime back itself, that one single object can have any number of references referring to it or pointing to it. It's absolutely fine. Any confusions? Okay, sir, Arjun's data is stored, but next we have again Keshav's data, because that is what I have stored in my list also. Arjun, Keshav, Manohar, Arjun, again next it happens to be Keshav. Tell me, if you have really understood till this point, will again a new object called as Keshav be allocated on the heap segment? 100% that would not be allocated, because your PVM happens to be one of the smartest softwares in your programming language called Python, and it would never afford to waste memory on your RAM. Hence, it would first try to scan whether already a string object called as Keshav is present on my heap segment. Yes, boss, it is present. If it is present, what it would all do is, for the same string object, it is just going to use the address. That means after my string object Arjun's data is tackled, next I would be storing Keshav's address like this, and as a result of which, all of you know what would be the impact with respect to the memory map. From this location, immediately start pointing to my Keshav's object. Any confusion so far? Again, here also repeat the same thing. I don't want any of you to have this doubt at the back of your mind. Sir, how can there exist multiple references, multiple pointers to one object? 100% it is possible in Python. And why it is possible in Python? Only for one simple reason. What is the sole reason? It is efficient utilization of memory. Any confusion? In fact, that is how it is actually in a real life also. You see, one person will tend to have multiple names. What do you mean to say, sir? Of course, if you let us take your example itself. The kind of names that your school friends would call you even today, 100% they will have different kind of names for you. Your parents have given you an official name which is there on your birth certificate, and maybe that one special person in your life will not be using your actual name. I hope you're able to understand. It is the same one person object, but you see, different people would refer to this one person object with different varieties of names. Same is the case with respect to Python as well. Okay, sir. Next what, sir? Next what means at the last, I should again ensure that my list this time would contain the last element as Manohar. In other words, I should be storing the address of Manohar in this case, which happens to be 4000. So if I just organize my diagrams properly, this is how it would actually look. And tell me, if this entire thing that you see is on the heap segment, is there any activity that would also take place on the stack segment? Absolutely yes. We have created a reference for this list. We have given a name to this list. And what is the name that we have given? We have called it as LST. As a result of which, on the stack segment, memory for LST would be allocated like this. And because of which, tell me, this LST is referring to what list? It is this list object, which is again containing references to Arjun, Keshav, Manohar. So primarily, what is the address of my list object in this case? It is 1000. That means 1000 would be stored in my list reference like this. And again, 1000 is an address in this case. Whenever a memory location would store the address, how is it going to behave? It will immediately start pointing to that list object. So finally, we have completed our memory representation with respect to that one simple creation statement that we had written, which is list equal to Arjun, Keshav, Manohar, Arjun, Keshav, Manohar. So again, let us quickly reiterate through the questions that would be asked with respect to this particular concept. Is it possible for you to store duplicate values inside a list? 100% yes. And who is going to confirm this to us? It is the print statement. When you try to print the contents of this list, 100% we have got we have seen in the output that we have 2 Arjuns, we have 2 Keshavs, and we have 2 Manohars. But then if you really have to understand what happens internally in the memory. Tell me, will there be 2 copies of Arjun, 2 copies of Keshav, or 2 copies of Manohar? No, that would never be the case, since Python happens to be one of the efficient memory utilization programming languages. That would not be the case. In fact, a single copy of the object would be maintained, and if at all you're trying to store multiple values of the same object, the same address would also be stored in those particular locations. Any confusion so far? Sir, we want you to write a program to confirm us that the 0th element. For example, what I mean to say here is, tell me in the 0th index as well as in the 3rd index, 0, 1, 2, 3, what is the address do we have? It is 2000. But one thing is for sure, that I don't know whether it would really be 2000, but what is that we are sure about? Whether it is 2000 or 20,000 or 20 lakhs, we really don't care about it. What we want to see is whether the address stored in the 0th index and the address stored in the 3rd index is same or not. If that is the case, would it confirm to all of you guys that one single copy of Arjun, one single copy of Keshav, one single copy of Manohar is present in the memory? Yes. So let me just quickly go to the program and see how we can confirm with respect to that as well. So, okay, I have printed the list. That is fine. Next, what I would like to see here is, I would like to get the address of all the 6 elements, 6 string objects that I have stored inside my list. So tell me, will you start writing code like this? Will you tell print list, print, of course, to print the address, you'll use the ID function, print the address of the first element from the list whose index happens to be 0. Similarly, ID of LST of 1, LST of 2, 3, 4, 5. Is that how you're planning to do it? 100%. That is not a right approach, because it would increase redundancy of your code. That should not be the case. Hence, we will have to make use of a loop. So maybe in this case, I'll make use of the for loop. Tell me, what is each of these element which is each of these list elements which you see on your screen is technically referred to as, and I've told you, it is technically referred to as an item. That means I would say, for each item in my list called as LST, I don't simply want you to print the item. Along with the item, please print me the ID or the address of the address of each of these items. What I'm trying to tell you here. Okay, sir, please execute this code and tell us what will be the output. Let us execute this code. And if I would execute the program, and if you carefully look at the output screen, forget about the elements. Anyways, we know it is going to be Arjun Keshav Manohar, Arjun Keshav Manohar. I want you to carefully look at the addresses in this case. Once again, all of you notice here, look at the address of first Arjun and the second Arjun. What do you think? Is it same or is it different? 100% you can see it happens to be same. Similarly, look at the address of the first Keshav object and the second Keshav object. Is it same or is it different? 100% it is same. Same is the case with respect to my last string object, which in this case is Manohar. Any confusions? So I hope you have understood multiple things from this example. Of course, for somebody who's not paying utmost attention, it might seem such a simple program. This is such a simple question. This is, of course, that is how the training would happen elsewhere. But with in ABC, that is not the way in which training would take place. And if somebody would just look at the program and just look at the output, even then I would say you would understand to an extent of only 70%. What gives you 100% clarity is this diagram, is this memory map. That is why it is always advised that whenever you try to learn any new programming language, maybe today it happens to be Python, tomorrow when you start working in the industry, your project team lead would ask you to learn a new programming language. You try to learn a new programming language, learn the programming language keeping the memory map as an index. It will give you much more clarity. You will have much more insights about the programming language. Any confusion so far? Right. I expect all of you to first quickly copy the program. Next, what we should be understanding is, please take down the heading as nested lists in Python. Please take down the heading as nested lists in Python. Nested lists in Python. Sir, what do you mean by nested lists, sir? This is, if this seems a very technical term for you, basically a list within a list is, in simple terms, it's called as a nested list. So what is a nested list? It is a list which is present inside a list. If you go through all the examples, all the program code that we have written so far, from my first session till this last example, you will see all this while a list, whichever list we happen to create, it would at the marks store different kinds of objects, different kinds of data. But what we are trying to understand from this example is it possible for us to store a list inside a list, or is it possible for a list to hold another list as one of its elements? Is it really possible? That is what we should be understanding. Like I said, in all the previous programs that we had written, we always had an independent elements. We always had a single data. But in this case, we're trying to store a sequence inside a sequence called as list. Okay, sir, please do it. You might say that is what I'm trying to do here. Let us say if this is how I would like to create a list. Maybe I'll change the reference name as LST. Tell me, what do you think are my list elements in this case? In total, how many list elements do I have here? 100%. If you look at it from an overview of the list here, you will see on the top the list called as LST is containing just 3 elements, which again internally happens to be lists. The very first list, the 0th index element in my list called as LST is another list. Similarly, the first element happens to be a list. Similarly, the second element also happens to be a list. So since we are creating a list within a list, this is what is called as nested list. Any confusion? So really, is that the case? Or 100% yes. And now if I would try to print my list contents, you can see as per our expectation, we have got the expected output. This is what is technically called as nested lists. But sir, how is it stored in the memory map, sir? That is what next we should be understanding. And I have told you, always you should give importance to the memory diagrams, because that would any day give you more clarity. Just a second. Right. So here now, let me clear all my drawings. We see the very first list that we have created here. 100% lists are also objects in Python. It would PVM go to our heap segment, and on the heap segment, it is going to allocate a brand new block of memory like this. Of course, it would also have a certain address. Maybe that we can take it as a later part. Now, inside this list, I see 100% memory for the list object also has to be allocated. So maybe let me just broaden this diagram and let us see. This is where my list is going to be allocated memory. So the outermost rectangle that you see here, it is a rectangle which is representing the object. It's a brand new object that has been created in the memory. Inside this object, what are you storing? You're storing a list. So the second rectangle, the innermost rectangle that you see here, happens to be our list. Now, in this example, our list is not an ordinary list in this case, because it is not just containing independent elements. It is not containing a string value or an integer value. It is internally containing another sequence, another list. So how is the memory allocated? So let us say this is the very first list, because that is what is the content of my 0th index. What do you mean to say, sir? What I mean to say here is, if we go back to our program, tell me what is the contents of our 0th index list. It is A, B, C, which again happens to be 3 string values. So inside my list, it is going to contain 3 string values like this. These are the contents of my first list. And of course, you might say, sir, just now in the previous example, you told us this is not how strings are stored inside the list. These string values will have separate memories on the heap segment. Their addresses will be stored here. 100%, yes. I never did deny the fact here. But then again, it is going to consume a lot of time. But I hope you understand from the previous diagram that whatever is stored in the list is actually the addresses of the different objects. And when you try to access it, the PVM would access the address and go to the respective object and fetch the data, and that is what is actually returned to you. Any confusion so far? Okay, sir. So what you see in front of you now, it is a list. ABC happens to be the contents of a list, and in turn, this list is present inside a different list. Any confusions so far? So this happens to be my 0th index value of my outermost list. Next what, sir? Next what means, again we have another list as one of the elements. Now this is the second list that I'm referring to, and the contents of my second list happens to be 2 string values. One happens to be D, one happens to be E. So let me go back to my program, and here again it is a list. So another list is going to be allocated memory here, and for this list, the data values that I'm supposed to store here is this is how my second list is going to be stored inside my outermost list. Next what, sir? Next what means the 0th index element of the outermost list and the first index element of the outermost list have been taken care. I should proceed with the second indexed element. Let us see what is the list we have in the second index. It is a list which is in this case containing 3 string values, F, G, and H. So let us complete the diagram for the same. Again, the outermost list is containing another list. That is in fact the reason why this is called as a nested list. And in this case, the Third nested list is containing 3 string values. One is F, next it is G, and next it is H. And of course, each of these strings will have their own index values in the innermost list. Next what, sir? Next what means we have completed the memory representation for this program, and this is how internally it is going to be storing. Now, just consider the outermost list in this case. Just consider the outermost list. Tell me which is the outermost list. It is this list object that I'm referring to. It is the list, this list object, the outermost list. You might say, sir, this is the outermost list. Again, I repeat, what you see as the outermost rectangle here is basically the block of memory that is allocated for this list object. So let me just give a random address to this. Maybe it is 1400. The outermost rectangle that you see, it is a block of memory that is allocated for the sake of this list object. We are actually starting to explore the list starting from the next rectangle. If considering in that case, tell me, is list an ordered data structure? Is it an ordered data type or an unordered data type? 100% it happens to be an ordered data type, an ordered collection of homogeneous and heterogeneous data. That is the definition that we have actually discussed. Tell me, what is the meaning of this word called as ordered? When do you call a data type as ordered, or when do you call a data type as unordered? Whenever you have index-based accessing privilege, that is when you can call a data type as an ordered data type. In other words, 100% in my list, the very first element would have an index of 0. Next, the second element, in this case it is a list, it really doesn't matter, even list is an object, so we'll have the index value as 1. Similarly, the last element in the list will have the index value as 3. Of course, we have also given a name to this entire list. I have called the list as LST. So here I will have to give the list name as LST, which will have its memory allocated on the stack segment, which would internally contain the address of the list object. In this case it is 1400, as a result of which it has to immediately start pointing to the object whose address is 1400. It is nothing but this list object. Any confusion? Again, we have just given the index values for the outermost list, but you know the contents here of the outermost list again happens to be list. That means even those list values will again have indexes. By indexes, I mean it is both the forward indexes as well as the reverse indexes. Any confusions so far? So this is how a nested list is actually going to be it can be represented in a very simple manner with respect to the memory perspective. Any confusion so far? But again, you know, I hope all of you understand now. It is just a superficial diagram that we have shown it here, but you know the actual way how it is going to be stored. What do you mean to say, sir? All of you focus here. That means each of these strings, A will have its separate address, B will have its separate address, C will have its separate address. Sir, what about this inner list, sir? It will have its separate memory. From that inner list memory, it will be pointing to those strings A, B, C. It will be holding their address. And this inner list, the 0th index list, will have its own address, and that address will be stored here as the 0th index, and that is how you'll start referring to. It's kind of a hierarchical structure that you'll be getting if you actually represent it. So you can maybe add few additional lines in the program code. For example, if you would like to retrieve each of these nested lists as independent elements, you can do it this way. What you can do it here is, see, and don't give VIP treatment for nested lists is what I would actually recommend. A list can contain any type of objects. In this program, what is so different here? A list is containing a list object. The way how a list would contain a string object, how a list would contain an integer object. In this program, a list is containing a list object. Maybe tomorrow you might write a program where a list would be containing a tuple object, it would be containing a set object, it could also be containing a dictionary object, it can contain any type of objects. So whatever it is, I would just refer to it as item. For each item in my list, in this case, we know each of these items happens to be lists in themselves. I would like to print these items separately. If I would execute the program, you can see each of these lists have been printed. Any confusion so far? So please copy it this way, complete the program, add those 2 extra lines of code, and in the output also. Right, please complete the program as well as the output, make it fast. Right, I assume all of you have completed. Quickly copy, make a note of the diagram also here. It happens to be a simple representation. Of course, there is a typing mistake in this case. The index sequence happens to be 0, 1, and 2. If you have completed, there is a quick exercise for you guys. Please look at the editor screen and the output also. I have given you a nested list, and this is my expected output. Please write the code for the same. Make it fast. I hope you understood my question. There is a nested list given to you guys, and this is the output that I'm expecting. So all that you have to do is you have to access it and print it. That is all you have to do it. You will have to write the program for the expected output. I have not written the program code. It is you who will have to write the code for this. I'm adding one more output on the output screen. I want DDD string also to be extracted. Take this as an assignment. I hope all of you will be able to do it. You just have to play around with the indexes, and if at all you're finding it difficult, maybe after the session you can ping either me or Karthik. We would certainly be of your help. Take down the next heading. Taking on the heading as list methods. The heading as list methods. List methods. Under that, take down the first method as append method. First method that has to be discussed, append method. Append method. Now, please understand what is the general syntax of append method. Now, All of you, please stop writing and concentrate. Look at the screen. It is hardly for another 15 to 20 minutes that the session would proceed. Now, this is the general syntax of the append method. It happens to be one of the inbuilt methods of list. So, if at all you have to call this method 100%, you'll have to make use of the list reference or the list name. I'll simply call it list name dot append. This is the general syntax. And what is this append method going to accept as input, sir? It is going to accept a single argument. What is this argument, sir? It is the data which you want to append to a list which you have already created. What do you mean to say, sir? Let me comment both these statements, assuming that you have already made a note of it. Please make a note of whatever is there on the screen, because without the comment. Right on the heading, list methods, under that first one, append method, and below that you can make a note of the general syntax also. This is the general syntax. Okay, sir. How do we actually write a program and verify, understand the working of append method? Let us assume this is a simple list that I have created. All of you focus here. Let your focus be on the system screen. Now, in my list, these are the different elements which I would like to store: 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50. After I have created this list, maybe after a few lines of code, let us assume all of a sudden I forgot that I actually had to add one more element to my list. Maybe the new element happens to be 60, and I know that this new element that I'm trying to add, it has to be inserted inside my list. If that is your expectation, how do we do it, sir? That is when, okay, before I append, let me first print the list, after which I would like to append, because I would like to see how did my list used to look before I perform the append operation, and how does it look after I perform the append operation. Now, if I would do list dot append and tell me what is the new argument that you want to add, it happens to be 60. Now, if I print my list, let us see how the output looks. Of course, if I want my program to execute, I will have to erase this non-technical content from the editor screen. So if I would delete it, and now if I happen to execute my program, as you can see, 100%, the very first output that you would see on the output screen happens to be my existing list without the append operation. And once you call the append method, you can see the new data 60 automatically, where has it been inserted to your list? It has been inserted to the end of the list. That is how append function actually works. Append method actually functions. Any confusion so far? Sir, would it not create a new list? Is it not going to return a new list to us? 100% not. Am I storing it in a new reference and am I then printing it? No, I'm printing the same list called as LST. So it is going to modify the existing list, wherein append method is going to insert the new data to the end of the list. Okay, sir. Next what means, let us assume after some time again I realized, it is not only 60 that I wanted to append to my list. I actually wanted to append 2 more elements now. Maybe it happens to be 70 and 80. Okay, sir, how do we do it, sir? Let us try doing that also. If I say lst.append, sir, what is the data you want to append? I have told you what is the data that I would wish to append now. 2 elements, which one happens to be 70, another happens to be 80. And after this, again, if I would try to print my list called as LST, and now if I execute the program, can you tell me what is going to be the output? 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, followed by 70, 80 is what you think, but look at the output screen. We have got an error here. Tell me, and the error is very perfect here. You can read the statement. The type of the error here is, it's called type error. And what does it say? Look, boss, append method takes exactly 1 argument. And how many arguments have you given? You have given 2. 100%. It is the mistake of the programmer here. Oh, Correct, sir. But sir, what if I encounter such scenarios in my coding when I'm coding real-time projects where I don't want to append a single element, I want to append a collection of elements. Maybe in this case it is 70, 80, sir. Maybe tomorrow I have to append 4 elements. Maybe after a few days I want to append 40 new elements. In that case, what would I do? If that is your expectation, whenever you want to insert multiple entities, multiple elements using the append function, since the append method expects a single parameter, what you do here is, okay, it expects a single parameter, right? Whatever data that you want to give, you better enclose it inside a list. Now, sir, how does it make the difference, sir? Look at it from the append's point of view. Append is this time expecting how many parameters, how many arguments, a single argument. How many arguments have you also given? You have given a single argument. What is that argument? It is a list. Then whatever multiple elements you want to add now, you wish to add now, you can give it as the elements present for the list. What do you mean to say, sir? Inside the list, you can give the elements like this. Sir, even though we are giving multiple elements now, sir, how will the append method accept it? Again, look at it from the append's point of view. How many arguments are you giving to append? Or append is receiving in this case, it is a single argument, which is a list. Indirectly, the list is containing multiple elements. That is absolutely okay for us. So really will that be possible, sir? 100% yes. And now if I would execute the program, as you can see, we have not got a single error and we are successful in inserting the data in the form of a list in this case. Any confusion? For some of you, in fact, that might be the concern here, sir. I want 70 and 80 to be inserted to my list, sir, but I want it to be inserted as one of the independent elements, sir. I don't want it to be present in the form of a nested list, because what you see, the line number 3 on the output screen, tell me, is it a normal list here? No, it is a nested list. The way 60 was inserted, 70, 80 was not inserted in the same fashion here. Oh, correct, sir. What can we do, sir? There is no other alternative for this, because that is the expectation of the append method. Append method says, look, boss, only one argument is accepted. More than one arguments, if you want to give it in the form of a list. So whatever argument you will give, 100% it is going to be appended to the last of this list. No, sir, I want it to be appended as 2 different elements. I don't want it to be present in the form of a list. Of course, this happens to be our very first method. In the further examples, how that can also be achieved would be clarified. Any confusions so far? So again, one of you might also have this question at the back of your mind. Sir, why does append method always appends the value at the end of the list? Because that is how actually append function, append method has been coded by Guido. See, usually, if you want to understand the meaning of append, every day for every session of mine, whatever notes you would have taken from the previous class, would maybe for a new session, maybe for today's session, did you take out a brand new notebook, and for every session, do you actually maintain new notebooks to make a note of things? No, wherever you had stopped, wherever you had concluded for the previous session, it is from the same point you actually continue. And this operation itself is called as append. So same thing is actually happening here also. Every day, what you have been performing in your notebooks is the append operation. Wherever is the end of the list, it is at that point, the new elements are going to be inserted. Any confusion? Right. Please take down the definition in this case. The append method in Python, the append method in Python adds a single item to the existing list. The append method in Python adds a single item to the existing list. A single item to the existing list, full stop. It does not return a new list of items. It does not return a new list of items, but will modify the original list but will modify the original list by adding the item by adding the item to the end of the list by adding the item to the end of the list. Full stop. After executing the method append, after executing the method append on the list, comma, the size of the list decreases by 1. The size of the list decreases by 1. I can see that many of you have failed in the test of how active you are. Tell me, will after you perform the append operation, will the size increase or decrease? It will increase. And what is that? You have made a note in your notes. Decrease, huh? Okay, be careful. So the size of the list increases by 1. Full stop. I would again repeat the same point. The append method in Python adds a single item to the existing list. Full stop. It does not return a new list of items, but will modify the original list by adding the item to the end of the list. Full stop. After executing the method append on the list, the size of the list increases by 1. Full stop. Any confusion so far? Right. Quickly copy the program. I'll comment the last statement here because it's going to generate an error whenever you try to pass multiple values, maybe 90, 100, 110, it would not accept. And what is that you would get? You would get a type error. Second method. All right, so let me delete all of this. The second method name happens to be extend method. The name of the method is extend. And sir, what is the general syntax of extend method? This is the general syntax of extend method. What is the method name in this case? Extend method. How do you invoke the extend method? How can you call the extend method? You should tell list name, whatever name you have given, lst, l1, l2, l, whatever list name, dot. The method name is extend. The way append method expected a single argument. What is the expectations of extend method? Extend method would always expect iterables as the input. It has to be one of the iterable. What do you mean to say, sir? What I mean to say 100% I'll be clarified. Please understand what was this method called as extend method provided in a programming language called Python. If you would ask me, it's for a very simple reason. We also looked at what is the advantage of append method, what was the disadvantage of append method. Whenever you try to insert multiple values using append method, it would always get inserted in the form of a nested list. If that is not what your expectation, if you don't want it to be stored in the form of a list within some other list, if you want it to be stored as an individual elements, as an independent element, that is when you will have to choose to use a method called as extend method. What do you mean to say, sir? Let us have the same data that we had in the previous example. I will create the same list called as LST. It has this data stored, which is 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50. Before I do any operation by using extend method, first let me print the contents of the list, which is by telling print of LST. Now I would like to add maybe a single element using, this time not by using append method but by using extend method. Let us see how it works. What do you mean to say, sir? Assume if I would say I would wish to add a single element inside my list, that is 60, by using the extend method. And now if I would try to print the contents of my list, what do you think the output is going to be? Sir, simple, sir. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, followed by 60, sir. What is so difficult in this? If that is what you are thinking, you're absolutely wrong. If I would execute my program, as you can see, we have not got the expected output as a series of 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. Please understand. Look at the general syntax of extend method that I have given to you now. What is it I have given to you? It has to be an iterable type of object. Please look at the error also on the screen here. Type error. What does the error say? Integer object is not iterable, boss. Sir, what do you mean to say, sir? Please understand. I'll explain to you what I mean to say from this. No, sir, I want 60 to be added, sir. If you want to add 60, do one thing. You better put this 60, you better enclose the 60 inside this pair of square brackets. And now if I would execute, now you can see, as per our expectation, 60 has been inserted to the list. And in fact, it has not been inserted into the list as a nested list. It has been inserted as a normal element. I know it's funny when you correlate both these methods. Whereas append method, if at all you want to insert a single element, you just have to write it as a single entity. No need for you to give a list. But then when you want to insert multiple elements, append method will force you to give it in the form of a list. But look at extend method. It doesn't matter whether you have to insert a single element or multiple elements. It always expects an iterable type of object. See, very simple. Again, don't get confused. Sir, what is this new object, sir? New type of object called as iterable. Iterable is such an object on which you can traverse, on which you can use loops. For now, you can consider it to be a type of iterable. See, on a list, can you traverse? Yes, you can tell list of 0, list of 1, list of 2, list of 3. 100% traversing is possible. So that is the meaning of an iterable object. Any confusion? But what is one commonality between append and extend function? Both the functions, both the methods would add the element to the end of the list. Am I clear so far? So again, I repeat, append method expects a single argument, whereas extend method expects the argument to be of type iterable. Any confusion? Okay, sir. Next what, sir? Next what means, let us see. What if you want to add multiple values to this list? What I mean to say is this. If I would say lst dot extend, and this time I want to add, maybe these are the different elements, 70, 80, 90. Tell me, if I would simply execute the program, will I get the output or will I get an error in this case? 100% I would get an error. Why? Because extend method always expects your argument to be of type iterable. Hence, it's my duty to enclose 70, 80, 90, 80 and 90 within my square brackets. And this time it is going to be of the form of a list, which is one of the iterables. And now if I would execute the program, as you can see, perfectly 70, 80, 90 have been inserted inside my list, and in fact in their native form, not in the form of a list. Any confusions so far? Right, please make a note of this. You can first take down the notes. Extend method extends a list. Extend method extends a list. Extends a list, full stop. It always takes iterable objects as input. It always takes iterable objects as input. Full stop. Next line. Extend method will add elements. Extend method will add elements individually to the list. Extend method will add elements individually to the list, comma, whereas whereas the append method whereas the append method adds multiple elements as a nested list as a nested list as a nested list. Right. Now, once again, this is just to check your understanding of the previous classes. Assume if I would say lst dot extend of maybe a single string object like this ABC, and now if I would print my list, will I get the output or will I get an error? Please understand what is the expectation of extend. It expects an iterable. It the documentation of extend, or I never stated that extend always expects multiple values to be present in the form of a list. 100% I never made the statement. Please understand, even string happens to be a type of iterable, because even in the string, on the string, can you traverse through the string? Can you access individual characters of the string? 100% it is possible. And now if I would execute the program, as you can see, because string is here considered to be a iterable object, each of the characters of the string are going to be considered as individual elements. This is also important that you should be knowing, because usually in the very first round, the technical aptitude round, you will usually see string values being inserted into the list using extend. You should not consider it to be as a single entity. In fact, it is going to be considered as three different entities in this case, since the length of the string happens to be 3. Each of these characters will be considered as individual entity. Please, I cannot emphasize enough as to how important these notes are going to be, and it's going to be a means of a lot of benefit to you guys. So please, it's another humble request that I'm making today. Kindly maintain your notes very neatly. These example by examples, the working of different kinds of methods and functions. You will not find it anywhere on the internet, or maybe in any textbook as well. So after all these lines, maybe you can take down when extend method would throw an error. Tell me if I would say extend of maybe 100, will it work? All of you look at line number 9. If I would say lst dot extend of 100, would it work? 100% it would not work. What is the error that I would be getting in this case? It would expect an integer. Maybe let type error where it says integer object is not iterable, right? uh, if at all you have understood this program, answer me if I would try to say lst dot extend. Maybe I would say I know it is going to expect an iterable. I would say maybe first, boss, please store this as one of the elements, maybe 110 as the first element, maybe 120. Tell me, now will it work? 100% yes, because I'm trying to insert the elements using the extend method, and which I'm also giving as the data is being fed to this method in the form of an iterable. Absolutely fine. What if I would try, okay, 110 120, after this I want you to add maybe a string value also like this. Tell me, are both of these iterables? 100%. Even list is an iterable, even string is no. If you're getting confused with string, let us take the example of another list itself, maybe 130 140, for the sake of simplicity. Am I giving the inputs to my extend method in the form of iterables? Yes. But then how many inputs am I trying to give? How many arguments? 2 arguments. Let us see if extend method would accept this. If I would execute the program, as you can see, again we have got the error, the same error what we had got received for append method. It says extend method exactly takes 1 argument. How many arguments are given? 2 arguments are given. So This is also important point for you to note it down. See, the next thing that we should be understanding here is, irrespective of whether it is append method or extend method, the elements or the items that you're trying to insert into a list are always getting appended or always getting inserted at the end of the list. What if you want to insert it somewhere at a random place? Maybe it is at the index value 3. That is where you wanted to insert maybe 60. If that is what you want to know, then you will have to better attend tomorrow's session.